Hello everyone and welcome back to another deck guide, this time featuring the newly released annoying little sweeties, the Yummies, and the slightly older but equally annoying Mimighouls. These are both level 1 archetypes, with Yummy focusing on Synchro Summoning and Mimighoul focused on XZs, but they're generic enough to jump back and forth between each other. Yummy's game plan is to Synchro Summon on the opponent's turn repeatedly to dodge removal and keep up a steady stream of disruption, while Mimighoul plays more of a floodgatey, control-y style by putting face-down monsters on your opponent's field that acts as landmines that they have to navigate. Combined, they're able to basically outmaneuver any opponent, and if that sounds fun to you, let's get started. Beginning with Yummies, since they're the new guys, all of the main deck Yummies can special summon themselves from hand if you control a Link 1 or a level 2 Synchro, and all of them act as a 1-card starter thanks to our always balanced and never broken access to a Link 1 monster. Starting with Cupsy, it searches any Yummy card on summon, or if summoned by a Synchro you can instead draw a card to find extra hand traps. Cookie here drops a monster's attack by 1,000 or destroys it with the modified effect, and Lilipo here shuffles a card in the grave back into the deck or banishes it if it is the modified effect. As for spells, we play one of Mignon, the field spell, which lets us reborn a Yummy and is part of our core combos. It also gives all Yummies 500 attack for each other one on the field, so our guys can get huge. And if in grave, it lets you shuffle up to 2 Yummies from grave and banishment back into the deck so we can never run out of resources. It's a real Swiss Army knife of a card, but it's supremely searchable, so we only need one of them. Lastly, for the Yummy engine, we play one Surprise. This is most often what you're going to grab off of a normal summoned Cupsy, and it's a modular quick play spell that lets you either reborn a Yummy, switch one field spell out for the other, or bounce 2 Yummies on your field and 2 of the opponent's cards to act kind of as a disruptive trap since it is a quick play spell. That last effect is probably the most important, and we don't actually even play the second Yummy field spell because we would rather end on the Mimighoul one anyways, so that mode's useless to us, but like double bounce and a reborn are still very good on a searchable card. On to the Mimighoul engine. This one's a bit more nuanced since not everything works as a starter, but our first card, Dragon, certainly does. So the Mimic's gimmick is that all of their monsters can summon themselves face down to the opponent's field once per turn, and then they have a negative effect when flipped face up before returning to the original owner to be used as material. Dragon here destroys all monsters before he comes home, which makes him priority number 1 to leave on the opponent's board before the end phase. His other effect is that if you summon him face up, say by your normal summon, you can search any Mimighoul spell trap to hand, and boy do we have some good ones. That effect is what makes him work as a 1-card starter because you can fetch other cards that work as 1-card starters. Next up is going to be Archfiend, who flips up and makes the controller, so your opponent, send a card from hand to grave, while the owner, you, draws one. Less flashy, but it's still very, very powerful. It also enables the scariest combo lines because when summoned face up, say by your normal summon or any way to special summon him, you can flip a monster the opponent controls face up to trigger the flip effects and recover the extra bodies on your own turn as part of your combos. Alas, like the rest of our Mimighoul monsters, he's not a starter, but they're all very easy to search, so we play him and the rest of them at 1. Next up is Slime, who when flipped lets the owner summon a Mimighoul from deck, and acts as an extender since he can be special summoned from hand if the opponent has more monsters than you. Fairy is very matchup dependent because when flipped the opponent can no longer use the effect of monster special summoned from their hand for the rest of the turn. That's crippling for some decks and does nothing to others, but more importantly she can special summon from hand if you control a Mimighoul, which makes her our most reliable extender. Lastly is the Master of Mimics himself. As the only level 4 in the deck, you aren't using him as material, but as an endboard piece since he can't be destroyed as long as you have another Mimic or the opponent has a face down. He searches a monster on summon to set up a face down on the opponent's turn, which is great, and can quick effect flip one on their turn to force a trigger if the opponent tries to ignore your friendly little guys. Next up, the spells and traps of Mimighoul are where the real power of this deck lies. First up is Dungeon, which really just does everything. It lets you search a Mimighoul monster every turn, which makes it a starter. It also pumps your Mimighouls, giving them all attack equal to their own defense on any turn after the one where they were first summoned. So you can't OTK super easily, but if you set up a control board, pass to the opponent, they pass back, all of your stuff gets huge and you can end the game quickly. And then lastly, it has an obnoxious little floodgate effect that prevents the opponent from normal summoning if they have a face down, and prevents them from attacking as well. Equally powerful to Dungeon is Mimighoul Maker, which allows you to reveal 2 flip monsters from the deck. It's kind of weird. Randomly give one to the opponent and add the other to hand, then you can special summon a Mimic from hand, including the one you just added. While it does have some randomness to it, no outcome is ever good for the opponent, and it also has a less important graveyard effect to flip up a face down, but it's not usable the same turn as the primary effect. Lastly is our Soul Trap, but boy is it a doozy. So, Mimighoul Room lets you special summon a Mimic from deck to the opponent's field face down, then also Book of Moon one of their monsters. If you already have Dungeon on field, this is back-breaking, because if you Book of Moon whatever they normal summoned, they can't flip at the same turn, which just means Dungeon remains online and they don't get to attack the entire turn. It's great. You can also banish it from grave to bounce any number of your own Mimighoul cards in order to protect them or to reuse them on following turns. Lastly, for Engine, we have a 1-for-1. It's self-explanatory since it just summons any level 1 monster from deck, and that's pretty much anything we could ever want. Then we run 16 non-Engine. This is a Dominus Purge deck, since the only thing in the whole deck that it turns off is Anima's Steel out of the extra deck, and we can live without that. Since we have Purge, Imperm also gets better, so we play that at 3. And real quick before we get into the extra deck, I do want to touch on the sideboard I have here. Obviously this is not a fully built sideboard, but I want to talk about these cards in particular. So we play Ensemble Robin as well as Kiki Nagashi Fucho in the extra deck, which means that we can use Harpy's Featherstorm as just a turn ender basically and a game ender. All we have to do is Xyz summon one of these guys if we get interrupted, or just if we have extra pieces and we already have access to one of these. Set this, flip it on the opponent's turn. They have to skip their entire turn, which is pretty funny. So because we have access to those, I do think it is important to have access to the full 3 storms and a playset of thrusts in between the main and the sideboard. Kind of up to you where you want to play one. You could put a Featherstorm in the main just in case you get hand trapped before the opponent expects it, but I like to leave the Featherstorm stuff to the sideboard. And then onto the extra deck, we are starting with the yummy half. Snatchies are aforementioned Link 1 and can be made off of any of the yummies. When you do so, he places the field spell on the field so you can immediately reborn the material you used for him and go for a Synchro Summon. He does lock you out of Link 3s or higher, so there is some amount of restriction to the deck, but it's really easy to ignore. What you can't ignore is his ability to quick synchro for the measly cost of 100 life at any time during the opponent's main phase or battle phase. This is what lets you continuously synchro over and over to dodge and annoy your opponent into submission on their turn. This is not a once per turn effect. Next up is Anima, which is less important, but he's mostly here as a Link 1 that Mimighouls can go into, which then lets you access the Yummy engine for free. His effect is relevant, however, since he can remove a monster he points to if your opponents aren't careful with their placements. Then we get into the Yummy synchros. They all can return to the extra deck and summon 2 Yummies from grave in response to the opponent's card effect. That's how we access those augmented main deck effects. Each then also has a unique on-summon effect. So Cupsy adds 2 Yummy monsters to hand and then discards a card. This is how we get from Mimighoul into the Yummy engine, and just accesses a ton of bodies. Next up is Lolipo, which reborns 2 on summon, but negates the effects. That's just good extension. And then lastly is Cookie, which is a double Book of Moon on summons, so we don't tend to use him until the opponent's turn. And then lastly for our synchros is Honorary Yummy Herald of the Arclight. This is a synchro 4, which is pretty easy to make in this deck, not as easy as the 2s, but still not terribly difficult, and gives us a minor Floodgate as well as tributing itself for an Omni Negate. Then on to the Xyz monsters. This is all the purview of the Mimighoul side of the deck. First is Giant, which has the generic cost of 2 level 1 monsters, so this is how we jump from Yummy to Mimighoul. When summoned, it just adds any Mimighoul card from deck to hand, and it can also help break boards by destroying opponents' cards, and helps end the game quickly, with some burn damage and letting your Mimighouls just attack directly, which is very scary. Next up is going to be Throne, which is not as generic. It requires 2 Mimighouls to make, but lets you summon Master straight from the deck and then gives you an extra disruption. Since as a quick effect, you can equip it to your Master, then bounce cards up to the number of materials that Throne had on the field. Out of archetype, we play the aforementioned Robin, which is a discount Ryziel Detonator, letting you detach material to bounce an opponent's special summon monster, and it's not once per turn. Very good in addition to enabling Harpy's Featherstorm plays. Next up is Kiki Nagashi Fucho, which is unaffected and lets us swing in without losing the monster to go into Downerd and then into Zeus so that we can wipe the board and reset the game. Lastly, we can take 2 spent rank 1s and make UDF for an indestructible monster negate and steal. And that is it for the actual deck profile, guys. Let's do some combos. Alright, so for our first combo, we're going to be doing the standard Yummy line, since I know that's probably what most people are here to see. Let's get started. So we're starting Cupsy, but you can start any of the Yummies. Cupsy is the best one because when you normal summon it, you can grab Surprise here, but regardless of which one you get, you're going to link it off into Snatchy. Snatchy's going to place Mignon, and then you can use Mignon to bring back whichever one you used for Snatchy, go into your 2. The 2 lets you get 2 more bodies and then discard a card. We discard the Surprise here. You don't want to do that if you can avoid it, but considering this is shown as a 1-card combo, that's the only option I have. If you can keep it, it's an extra disruption on the opponent's turn, which is pretty cool. But getting the 2 to hand, discarding that, lets us go into Lolipo Way. Lolipo Way brings back 2 Yummies from the grave with negated effects, and we can use those to go into Giant Mimighoul to get Maker. So Maker is kind of random. You're always going to show Archfiend and Dragon, and the combo line does change a little bit based on which one you get. This is not the most straightforward deck because of that little bit of randomness. It's good regardless of which one you get, but it is different. Here I get Dragon, which allows us to special summon the dragon, use its effect to grab Dungeon, which is the best option, I would say. And then Dungeon lets us get Fairy. Fairy can special summon itself out because we have a Mimighoul on board. So we can go into Throne, use Throne to summon Master. Master gives us Dragon to give to the opponent, so they're going to have an Archfiend and a Dragon, and we're going to have Master to flip whichever one we want. Then we're going to use our spare Xyz to go into UDF. So that's the end board here, is that they've got an Archfiend for the discard for them, draw for us. They've got Dragon for the board wipe for them, and if they try not to use those, they cannot normal summon because of Dungeon, and we can force a flip of one of those off of Master. And then on top of all of that, we've got 2 Yummies ready to go. So this is, I would argue, very, very difficult to beat. I guess like a Dark Ruler does it, but not a whole lot else does. Okay, for a second combo, we're going to show you the weak version of the pure Mimighoul line. So we're starting with just Dungeon, and when we activate it, we can grab Dragon, normal summon Dragon, which gets us to Maker. We're going to hit the wrong card off of Maker, and we are still going to be able to go, but we would do a lot better if we had hit the Archfiend for us and the Slime for them. Unfortunately, that just gives us the 2 materials because we don't have a good way to flip the Archfiend unless we go into Mimighoul Throne. So with limited materials, we could have used these to just go into the yummy stuff. That is an option. Here, because we already have Dungeon on board, I feel like going into Master is probably a bit better because we can give them the Dragon along with the Archfiend, and that is a couple of problematic cards they have to deal with, and Dungeon is locking them down in case they try to ignore these cards, and then Master can still force the board wipe by flipping Dragon. So not as good, and if you do the same line, you can use the two materials instead of going into Throne just to do the yummy stuff. Just wanted to show you that if you miss, you can still end on one of the engine's full boards. And lastly, we're going to show you what happens if you high roll doing the entire Mimighoul line. So we're going to start with Dragon here. Normal summon the Dragon, that gets us Dungeon. We can activate Dungeon, and we're going to grab Fairy because Fairy is an extender here that we can just summon for free to get to 2 bodies. That means that we can overlay for Giant Mimighoul to grab our Maker. And then Maker here, we're going to reveal Slime and Archfiend, and we actually hit the one we want to this time. We hit Archfiend, which lets us flip Slime, summon Master, get the Slime as an extra body, search the Dragon to give to the opponent. So now we have Master and Dragon online, and we can use those 2 bodies to go into Anima, then go into the entire Yummy line. Because if you go into Cupsy, then you can grab 2 of them. We discard 1. Again, you don't want to discard a Yummy if you can help it. But even if you have to, you can still do the full line and end with everything in the entire world. So this one, on a high roll, we've got a flip for Dragon. We've got Herald of the Arclight doing its Floodgate and Omni-Negate thing, and we still have one of our Yummies set up, and the one set up Yummy just turns into the entire Yummy combo, and we get to keep Surprise. We don't even have to use it for the Reborn, so very, very scary board here. Cool, cool. And we're back with closing thoughts on our Yummy Mimighoul deck. So, as far as pros go, the biggest one is just the increased top end. So, Yummy already has a ridiculously powerful top end, enough to compete with the best of the best meta decks right now, and we make it even better by adding things like floodgates and board wipes and stuff that the opponent has to play around. Mimighoul Room feels like an objectively broken card, and just that on top of Yummy is like backbreaking in my opinion. There's not a whole lot of decks that can play around that without something like a Dark Ruler, and even Dark Ruler doesn't get you out of Room, or like a Raw Ball, and same thing there. So, you know, very, very scary top end. Other, maybe less important things is I like the inclusion of UDF because while Yummy has Herald of the Arclight, and some builds will play 2 Heralds of the Arclight, those are single-use negates. They are single-use Omni-Negates, which is great. UDF is reusable. It helps you close out the game in a way that Herald of the Arclight doesn't. It is resilient in a way that Herald of the Arclight isn't. It's just limited to monsters. So UDF's great, and then the Zeus line, technically Yummy can already do this, but Yummy doesn't like keeping its materials under an Xyz monster. It likes to put them in the graveyard so it can recur them. Mimighoul doesn't care, so because we have the Mimighoul line, it's easier to justify something like going into a Zeus and sitting on the Zeus to just present one more massive problem for the opponent. Same thing with like Ensemble Robin. Great card in my opinion. You wouldn't use it in regular Yummy. Mimighoul doesn't mind because it really doesn't touch the graveyard. That's another pro, is that Yummy doesn't play well under Floodgates. Mimighoul really does not care. Even if you get de-shiftered, you can just do full Mimighoul combo and end on that board, and that's perfectly functional in and of itself, which is pretty cool. As far as cons go, the biggest and maybe only one in my opinion is the lack of non-engine. We run 42 so that we get to play a couple of extra non-engine, and we do have 19 one-card starters, so we are not lacking for those. But 16 is a lot lower than either of these decks can run pure. Yummy can literally run like 22 to 23 non-engine if it is pure. Mimighoul's a little bit lower, but it can still run upwards of like 20, so 16 is low, and I think that's probably why this deck's not going to be super meta relevant. Sure, you could start cutting one card starters like Maker and Dungeon, or maybe you could run a higher amount, maybe you run 45 and the deck might run fine just like that, but either way, I don't think it's gonna be the best version. But if you want to play with the new annoying guys, and instead of being the annoying meta version, well, maybe try this version and see how that fits ya. Cool? Cool. So that will be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.